Stranglethorn was as busy as ever. Hemet Nessingwary Jr. was seeking to make his father proud by continuing the safari tradition, though he was having some issues with it. Booty Bay didn't fare particularly well in the Cataclysm, but damned if the Blackwater Raiders didn't make a go of it. Baron Revelgas, the leader of the Blackwaters, was known to be one of the more fair and even-minded pirate lords, and the Blackwaters themselves enjoyed reasonable relations with the major powers. This naturally put them directly in the crosshairs of the worst pirates on the seas. No, not the South Sea Freebooters, they were a group you can negotiate with. No, the Blackwaters were being targeted by the Bloodsail Buccaneers, the most loathsome and largest of all pirate fleets. The Buccaneers had recently lost one of their best to the Dreadblades. Long story. This meant the Buccaneers were absent an entire fleet and thus had to resort to alternate means to claim the prize they sought, Booty Bay itself. This included other pirates, Naga, and rogue Worgen sailors. Baron Revelgas sent champions to infiltrate the Buccaneers to sabotage them and give them a heads up on their plans. The espionage successful, the Blackwater were ready for the Bloodsail, and the Buccaneers' power base was smashed, leaving only Admiral Tethys and his affiliates surviving. Meanwhile, in more serious matters, Jindo the Hexer, the superior hex priest and Gurubashi loyalist, died in the adventurer raid on Zul'Gurub years prior. But by now, you know trolls and death. Jindo sought to rebuild the Gurubashi, bringing back the Bloodlord Mandokir to resummon Hakkar, though not as his servant, but rather Jindo took a page out of his Drakari Brethren's book and consumed Hakkar's power for his own. Further efforts were put into recruiting Zanzil the Outcast, an alchemically skilled madman who used his crazed concoctions to coerce dead priests back to the living, for certain definitions of the word. Thankfully, local efforts prevented Jeklik's return, but not Vinoxus. By coincidence, this is roughly when the troll prophet Zul was beginning his journey to all the former troll lands, seeking to convince the disparate tribes to unite under a singular flag. His. Zul's visions of the future were eerily accurate, and with this gift he was able to convince many, including Jindo. The Darkspear warned both major powers of this new confederation, and champions quickly split into two groups. Some journeyed north to the Blood Elven lands, while the others stayed presently to once again delve into Zul'Gurub. High Priest Vinoxus, now twice enslaved by the Gurubashi, was as effective as ever in pursuing his master's twisted designs. High Priestess Kilnara was the sister of the former Bethic priestess and, unlike Vinoxus, was quite willing in her support of the new Zul Confederacy. The Bloodlord Mandokir actually walks about in the corpse of another, his own having been destroyed past recognition in the previous assault. Thankfully, this new body wasn't quite suited to the Bloodlord, and a certain young raptor was freed from his grasp. This left crazed Zanzil. Zanzil was actually exiled once from his fellows for going too far, which should really tell you something about him. Now gifted a place of belonging after so long astray, he was more than willing to turn his cauldrons towards the Confederacy's purposes. This just left Jindo the Godbreaker. Having successfully consumed Hakkar's power, Jindo was almost too much for the champions, but they decided to take a different tact, instead releasing Hakkar from his bonds, who promptly ripped his power right back out and broke Jindo for good. Meanwhile, much further north, their efforts were being supported by Haldoran Brightwing and Varisa Windrunner, one of Sylvanas' two sisters. Together with the champions, they charged into Zul'Aman to deal with the resurgent Amani threat. Rituals feeding on the souls of victims aren't exactly new, but the Amani added a new touch. They sacrificed the bodies of their victims to empower their soldiers, and then fed the souls of their victims into the Loa they were currently binding, thus empowering themselves by proxy. This is a more nuanced take on what the Drakari had done back in Northrend, and no less messed up for it. A former shaman, already a talented air elementalist, was a perfect fit for the Eagle Loa, Aklazon. One of the strongest Amani in raw strength, renowned for his rage and savagery, thus the Bear Loa Nalarak. The Amani's premier rogue, slotting him in for the Dragonhawk Janalai, and the tribe's greatest hunter, thus befitting the Lynx Loa Halazi. All of this was done at the behest of the Hexlord Malacrass, one of the most ambitious and skilled witch doctors the Amani had seen in generations. Malacrass's efforts to bind the Loa to his minions paled in comparison to what he bound himself to. You'd be forgiven for forgetting, but it was mentioned some time ago that 2 Cathraxi were loosed by Loken to kill Tyr. Tyr killed one of those, but the other, Kithix, was buried beneath what would someday be Zul'Aman. So make of that what you will. With that, all that was left was Dakara, a random troll dude no one's ever heard of, who is definitely not a carbon copy of Zul'jin, wink wink. While these assaults stunted the Zul Confederacy's efforts substantially, it did not break them completely, and they would emerge again in future years.